Okay, we're about to start. Welcome, 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 welcome to this day and happy birthday, Peace Corps. Yes, it's the end of Peace Corps week. We're so happy that you decided to join us. We have quite a few people that have registered, so we're going to give it a little time to give people time to come in and register and make sure that they're in the space. In the meantime, let's do a check-in in the chat. Put in the chat, are you a RPCV? Did you serve before? If you did, put in what country you served in and what year you served, or if you're here as a curious participant, just put in the chat where you're joining us from. What's the weather like as well? I'm in New York City. It's pretty sunny here, and I'm drinking a little tea this morning. But let's do a check-in in that chat box. Let us know if you're RPCV, what year. I'm RPCV, so I'm gonna put in 1618, and let us know if you're just curious. And if you are curious here to learn more about Peace Corps Week, just put in the chat box where you're joining us from. The chat box is enabled. We're waiting for more people to step into the space. Thank you. RPCV Malawi, 9698. Yes. Stamford, Connecticut. Thank you for joining us. Keep checking in. We're going to wait a few for some more people to join us. Keep checking in. Happy birthday, Peace Corps. Welcome to Peace Corps Week. This is actually the last day. We're doing a quick check-in in the chat box. I see many RPCVs are here in the space, checking in to support today. We have RPCV Philippines 2010, 2013, RPCV 1964-66. We have lots of people who are RPCVs joining us. If you're not a returned Peace Corps volunteer, also check in. Just say what country you're joining us. Sally, we can't do raise hands questions that way. Use the Q&A box. If you have any questions, put them in the Q&A box, and I'll be talking more about that later. We have so much to do today. We're going to officially kick off. Let's get started.
Are you looking for more in this world? Are you ready for something bigger? Then we are looking for you. The big-hearted, the bold, the messy and the gutsy. The teachers, the growers, the builders, the change makers. We need you. We are the Peace Corps. In more than 60 countries, we go all in and all out. We are volunteers, partners, communities, working together, living together, bringing our experience, passion, and joy to building a better world together. We are powered by connection. We are driven by purpose. We open our arms, our hearts, our doors, our minds. We share freely and serve boldly. Are you ready to tackle the tough stuff? To go the distance to make a difference? Then we have a place where you belong. The Peace Corps. Join us.
Welcome, 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 welcome to this day. Happy birthday, Peace Corps. Yes, it's Peace Corps' birthday. The Peace Corps was founded March 1st, 1961, with President John F. Kennedy's call for Americans to serve communities around the globe. Today's Story Slam is a great way for us to celebrate Peace Corps Week. And we're doing that as we feature some of the founding members in that first cohort in the Philippines. Today's celebration is a vibrant tapestry of cultures, friendship, and positive change, woven together by the counterparts, partners, staff, and volunteers around the world. So we celebrate and we say happy birthday to Peace Corps, to the past, to the present, and to the future. Our theme for Peace Corps Week is optimism in action. This celebrates the way that Peace Corps celebrates with communities and different countries. I'm really excited about this celebration today because we have some, as I said, some of our panelists are in that very first cohort in the Philippines. Quite amazing, quite amazing. So let me go through some quick ground rules so we can get started. Today's event is going to be recorded. It is recorded. We don't automatically send out recordings, but if you would like a copy of today's recording, I'm going to give you my email at the end. Please send me an email. I'll be more than happy to send you that link soon as the recording is approved. Now, if you have any questions, we did a chat, checking in the chat box, but we're going to use the Q&A box so I don't miss any of your questions. So like Sally, I see your hand raised. Please put your question in the Q&A box. This way I can send it directly to our panelists. Also, we have closed caption enabled. I've enabled it on my end, but if you need that reasonable accommodation on your end, please enable it on your device. Got those house rules out of the way. Now let me formally introduce myself. I am your host for today. My name is Ann Reed. I'm known that way in the Peace Corps community, but I am also a returned Peace Corps volunteer. I served twice. I served in Moldova from 2016 to 2018 as a community economic development volunteer. Now in Moldova, we learned and we spoke Romanian. There, my name was Doamna Ann. I did a second tour of service in 2018 to 2020. I was a youth and development volunteer. In Eswatini, we spoke the language of Siswati. My name there was Nokotula, Spongiles, Lamini, Guala Guala, and I had about 10 other names that went with it. So it took me about 3 minutes just to introduce myself. So language, you know, is a very, very important part of our service. As I said, I'm really excited about the panelists that we have today. Again, I want to reiterate, if you have any questions, please place them in our Q&A box. This way I can send them directly to our panelists and we're going to be able to respond to some of those questions live. So since 1961, at the invitation of foreign governments, more than 240,000 Americans have served the United States and countries around the globe as Peace Corps volunteers. There are currently 2,400 volunteers working alongside community members in 58 countries, addressing the persistent impacts of COVID-19, climate change, and tackling local development across the Peace Corps. We have 6 sectors that we serve under: agriculture, community economic development, education, environment, health, and youth and development. Today, we're really celebrating one of those first cohorts. Peace Corps Philippines is the agency's second oldest countries program. In October 1961, the first group of Peace Corps volunteers arrived in Manila to work in education as English language educators and science teachers. Now, please note in the picture, there were more men serving at the time. Today it's a little more flipped. We have more women in service. But I'm not the expert on this. I have some expert panelists who actually served in Philippines in that first cohort in 1961 to 1963. I'm so honored today to have these panelists with us today. We have Ambassador and former RPCV, Brenda Brown Skunova. We also have Ambassador, former RPCV, Parker Borg. And we also have former RPCV and former country director, Maureen Carroll. They're all going to speak really, really in-depthly about their experience being part of that first cohort in the Philippines. And I also want to note, this group in the Philippines, they actually have an alumni group. And their alumni group has been meeting for 20 years, started in 2002. So if you really want to talk about lasting friendships, I think this really kind of speaks to this group, that they are still meeting for 20 years. And I'm hearing that next year, the alumni group, it's about 30 or 40 of them, they're going to Montreal for their next alumni group. I think that's amazing. So we're going to have our first speaker come on. I want to read her bio, a little bit from her bio. They've all done so much, so I can't even really read the entire bio, but I just want to read a little bit. Ambassador Brenda Brown Skunova is a native of Maryland. She received her Bachelor of Arts from Morgan State University. Almost immediately after graduating in 1961, she joined President John Kennedy's newly formed Peace Corps as one of the first Peace Corps volunteers in Maryland. Brenda is considered a charter member of the Corps. Ambassador Schoonover proudly wears the honor of being one of the 2 former Peace Corps volunteers invited to represent Peace Corps volunteers at President John F. Kennedy's funeral. I want to welcome Ambassador Schoonover. She also was the, let me get it right, the Associate Director of the Peace Corps Tanzania. Just so many things that you've done. So I want to welcome you. Please come off mute, Ms. Brenda, and introduce yourself. Talk a little bit about your service in this slide.
Well, thank you very much. I'm really honored to be here today. And I want to give a brief description of my Peace Corps experience. All of us at the time, as you mentioned, were in education, and I was teaching 5th and 6th graders. The highlight, in addition to that, I helped start a summer camp, and the highlight of that experience was establishing a library of 6,000 books with the help of my friends, my family, and Ena Pratt Library in Baltimore.
Wow. Now, what was the language that you spoke there?
We were taught, once we got into country, we trained at Los Baños before going out to our assignments. And we were taught in Tagalog, but in fact, the places where we went, Tagalog was not the first, it's called Filipino as well, not the first language. So we really ended up using English most of the time, which is what we taught in. And some volunteers did learn the local dialects.
Wow. And at that time, was it hard to learn the language? How many hours a day did you study the language?
Well, while we at Los Baños, I can't remember how many, but I remember it was a lot.
And PST is similar. Languages are definitely a big part of it. So
yes, and we, I think all of us came away with some useful phrases, which we still share when we get together.
Okay. Well, can I have one of those useful phrases? I'd like to learn something. What are one of the phrases that you remember?
Let me see. That's a good question. We called ourselves the Quans.
Oh, okay.
Which really means somebody or something. Okay. And we still call ourselves Quans.
I like it. Mm. You brought some incredible pictures with you. Really talk us through these pictures. What's happening here?
This is the arrival of volunteers, the first group in the going to the Philippines. This is coming off of Pan Am flight, which took about 30 of us. And fortunately, it was still enough gallantry that the 30 of us were included, the first 30 women. And at that time, I was very happy that my last name was Brown because it was done alphabetically. And as you see, we arrived, we were 128 of us all together. And we arrived before the other volunteers who were on a charter flight called Slick Airlines. And in this picture, you see Maureen Carroll, one of our speakers today. And she's in the glasses, it's down at the bottom of the stairs. And you can just barely see my elbow.
I see you there. I see you. Wow. Now this next picture, I'm extremely impressed with this. Sergeant Shriver, how did this happen?
Well, this was, the Peace Corps continues to, and certainly in the earlier days, we had kind of rounded anniversaries for important years. The first one I think was the 10th, and then this one was the 25th. And it's Sergeant Shriver and I, we are at the National Arboretum where we had planted a tree in honoring the charter members, the first members of the Peace Corps. And at that time, Lorette Rupee was the actual director, but as you know, Sergeant Shriver had been the first director.
Oh, okay. Yes. And was it often that volunteers were able to interact and speak with Sergeant Shriver?
Well, fairly often. When at the 10th, we had an anniversary party or a celebration and lectures, and he was there, and we got to see him. And then Maureen and I both had worked in the Peace Corps at the time when he was still director, or part of the time when I was there, when I was working in the Office of Talent Search. He was still director. Very personable, very just incredible leader.
Now, this next slide, this is actually kind of the project that you were working on. Tell us about that.
Well, this is the library that I founded, and it was part of the town hall, and the school officials and the town officials had found this space for the library. And in addition to finding the space for the library, they also, we negotiated that they would have a librarian. And the librarian was a former janitor, obviously very overqualified for what he didn't intend to do initially. And here is a picture of the librarian and me and one of the school officials and one of the town officials.
Oh, wow. And so what made you decide to start the library?
I don't know. I guess seeing the condition and the scarcity of the books in that community. It was a town of about 10,000 people, and it had no library at all, not at school or any other place. And it was some distance from a larger city. So I think I was, and maybe, I don't know if there were, I think there were other libraries. I don't remember this was the first one, but I'm still very proud of it. And it did last for 15 years until it was destroyed by a typhoon. And I got to go back to the town and meet some of the people.
We have a question here, Brenda. Someone's asking, what was the city and province that you served in? And
it was Magarao, Camarines Sur, and not far from Naga City, but maybe 10 kilometers from Naga City.
That's nice. And did all of you serve there, the three of you, or?
No, we were scattered all over the country, and we were, as had been mentioned earlier, that we were living in groups of 4, and at that time we started off all as teachers, and we were supposed to be teaching English as a second language or be advisors to the teachers there, but we all ended up getting our own classrooms because it just worked out better that way.
Understood. You're getting lots of hellos in the chat. I'm going to make sure to send the chat to you so you can see who's saying hi to you after this. But now I know you have some incredible stories because you've shared quite a few with me. Can you now share one of the stories with us about, I know you said you want to share a particular story from a book that you participated in.
Okay. Can you see this?
Yes, I can. It says, Answering Kennedy's Call.
Okay. In 2011, in celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Peace Corps, Philippines groups 1, 2, and 3 put together an anthology of essays. The book is called Answering Kennedy's Call, Pioneering the Peace Corps in the Philippines. Parker Borg and Maureen Carroll, whom you will hear from later on today, this hour, were among those who were editors of the book. There were 2 other editors as well, 4 editors altogether. And as I said, there were 2 from group 1, 1 from group 2, and 1 from group 3. The book is still available. It was published, the publication was awarded the Independent Publishers Book Award, the IPPY Award in 2012 in the category of Peacemaker of the Year. My essay in that book, and I'm not going to read the whole essay, but I do want to give you some parts of it, is entitled On Being an American. I would like to share or paraphrase some parts of it. First, I want to explain why I selected the title. I had attended an all-Negro elementary, junior, and senior high school in Baltimore County, Maryland, until 1955, when the law changed, adhering to the National Desegregation Law of 1954. Entering my junior year in high school with 9 other students who chose to integrate the white senior high school, that was a population of 1,500 white students, 9 newly arrived Black students. Though the situation was not as harsh as the Deep South, it was by no means easy. That was the reason that after I graduated from high school, I had the opportunity to go to any of the Maryland university complexes, and Morgan State College was under that umbrella. I chose to go to Morgan rather than University of Maryland because I needed a campus social life as well as an education. But once I joined the Peace Corps, I felt a part of a team whose players had shared purposes and like values. I learned something I could never have learned at home during that period. Overseas, I was able to be an American, as opposed to being a Negro American, negotiating the restrictions imposed by racism. The Peace Corps offered me a freedom denied me in my own country, or at least in that part of the country in that era. One event that brought home to me the full significance of the impact of the Peace Corps was experience that I had when I visited the Texas Book Depository in Dallas, Texas, to view the exhibit of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. The longer I stayed on the 6th floor of the Texas Book Depository, the more it struck me of how much President Kennedy had influenced my life. Eventually, I stopped viewing the exhibit and sat on a bench. I thought of how Kennedy's call to service in his inaugural address had heightened my interest in volunteering. Even earlier in my junior year in college, I'd seen 2 moving television documentaries, one on Crossroads Africa and one on Teachers for East Africa. That spurred my interest in serving abroad. Plus, there were several more students at Morgan State that were from newly independent African states. These encounters enhanced my interest in working abroad, preferably in Africa. And then, as I was about to graduate from college, the Peace Corps was being formed, just what I'd been looking for. I took the Peace Corps exam, and at the earliest possible time that I could, 12 hours later, I had a telegram offering me an assignment in the Philippines. So I located the Philippines on the map and responded in an affirmative. It was not Africa, but it was the answer to my wanderlust to serve abroad. Sitting there in that book depository, all those memories surfaced. I found myself weeping, not caring who noticed me. That day, everything came back to me. It seemed to solidify my realization of the dramatic effect the Peace Corps had had upon me. I thought of all the wonderful people I had met, fellow volunteers, Americans, countless foreign nationals who've been a part of my life during my volunteer years and subsequent overseas experience, how the Peace Corps was the foundation for other major decisions I made, such as joining the Foreign Service. And even more importantly, it was while I was associate director of the Peace Corps in Tanzania from 1965 to 67 that I met my fantastic husband from California, Dick Schoonover, who was serving the embassy as a cultural affairs officer. And I also reflected on how much I'd learned from my gentle, gracious Filipino hosts who had helped me develop an understanding of the importance of cultural sensitivity, knowledge that has served me well, especially as a volunteer in many countries I've lived and worked. Yes, I thought of the moving President Kennedy's funeral, the ceremonies on November 25th, 1963, the slow motor procession from St. Mark's Cathedral in Washington to the Arlington. The streets were lined with silent mourners. I, along with one other returned volunteer, Tom Scanlon of Chile, had the honor of being invited to represent the Peace Corps volunteers, to ride in the limousine with astronaut John Glenn and his wife, Annie. Our presence bestowed the honor of being American pioneers. Yes, I was crying for our country. It's an incredible loss of a vibrant president. But I was also overcome with gratitude, a profound appreciation of my good fortune to have had the unique experience of being a pioneer, a part of Kennedy's brilliant creation, the Peace Corps, at its inception. It was my gateway to many other far-flung places and encounters. So many fascinating people. It allowed me to be a citizen of the world, and a very proud one, and a lucky one at that.
Wow, I'm so moved by that. I mean, wow, just the trajectory of it all, and that even though you wanted to go to Africa, you wanted to serve. That seemed like the bigger arch that you have it. And then, how did you feel when they invited you to attend JFK's funeral? What was that moment like?
The moment when I got my telegram,
Yes.
well, first of all, I was just, it was incredible that it was only 12 hours from the time I took the exam. And secondly, I think, I was naive, and I really was focusing on Africa, where I should have been focusing on many of the, any parts of the world where I would go into, but we didn't know enough to know at that point which countries they would be starting in. My mother was very supportive. She could have said, wait a minute, you just finished college. How about going out and making some money? And
Right.
we started off as volunteers, making $52 a month. So it was not what one would normally make as a new college graduate, at least in those days.
And Brenda, how did they contact you to invite you to JFK's funeral?
I think after a lot was done by letters or telegrams at the time, but we were invited to go into training at State College, Pennsylvania, and that's where 160, I think it was 163 of us showed up for training, and 128 of us made the cut. And one of the things I think was unique at the time was not only did we have physical training and physical exams, but we also had interviews with the psychiatrists rather.
Wow, pretty impressive. We do have some questions that we'll be responding to later. Brenda, someone asked, is the library still up and running? Do you know?
No, I think I mentioned that, unfortunately, and there were other volunteers that came in afterward, at least one I know who did help, but the library, that area is known for really for typhoons, and about 15, the library existed for about 15 years before it was destroyed in a storm. And I don't know how much of it got replenished as it went along, depended on the community and if there were volunteers there.
Understood. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. Again, if you have any other questions for Ambassador Brenda, please place them in. We're going to now move on to our next panelist. Thank you, Brenda, again. I'm going to read a little bit also. Again, they all have such impressive careers, so it's a little hard to narrow it down to a paragraph. Ambassador Parker W. Bourg served for more than 35 years in the American Foreign Service. He was nominated by 3 separate presidents of ambassadorial positions and held senior jobs at the State Department. He was nominated as an American ambassador to Mali, Burma, and Iceland. He began his government career as a Peace Corps volunteer in the Philippines. Welcome, Ambassador Bourg. I'm so happy that you're here. Tell us a little bit about your service with this slide.
Thank you very much. Very pleased to be here. I went into the Peace Corps fresh out of college. I had no idea exactly what I was getting into, and I didn't know very much at all about what teachers might do. But I went out there and I worked hard and learned as I went along. But I had a wonderful time in the Philippines and a wonderful time in various foreign service jobs afterwards.
You have brought some amazing pictures with you, so I really want to talk about this. So I believe this is where you were living during your service?
The house on the left is the place where the 4 of us were assigned. We were assigned in groups of 3 or 4 volunteers, all males or all females. And this was my group house. And the picture to the right shows the 4 of us from my household, the two people on the left, and then the other two of us on the upper right-hand corner. We were visiting a family, and I think this was the only picture that was ever taken of all four of us together.
Wow, wow. Now, this is very interesting. Tell us about this picture.
The picture on the left was taken at the end of our training program in Los Baños. And one of the festivities that's popular in the Philippines is a pig roast. And I'm carving a pig here. Exactly how I got this honor, I don't really remember. But I guess I told people that I knew how to carve a turkey or something like that. But standing to my right is Brenda, and then other volunteers from our group are there also. And then standing to the left are a lot of the Filipinos who were involved in our training program.
Now, how were you selected to carve the pig? Do you know anything about this, or you just went for it?
I think I just went for it. I haven't a clue. I was certainly not a leader of the group in any way whatsoever. Somebody handed me the knife, or I took and picked up the knife because nobody else wanted to do it. I don't know. I don't remember.
And here,
The other pictures there do not show me working, but show me learning about life in the Philippines, what plants grew in the jungle, and what it was like growing rice in Filipino fields. This is not what you would say. The field at the bottom is not what one would consider a wonderful rice field, but this was the way they grew it in much of the Philippines.
and were they really kind of friendly about if you ask questions like, what are you doing? What?
Everybody that I met was very, very friendly. I expected to meet many more people that were skeptical than I ever encountered. But Americans had a wonderful reputation in the Philippines at the time. The first teachers that had come to the Philippines had arrived more than 60 years earlier. And so the Filipinos had a tradition of American teachers coming to teach English. It was an interesting situation in that the Philippines at the time, all education was in English from the first grade on. And the kids didn't speak a word of English when they arrived in first grade, but they were doing all of their lessons in English. It was very sad in the sense that many of them never made it beyond fourth grade, and would then go back to their villages basically illiterate because they'd forget their English, and they never really learned to read and write in their own language.
Good. This is great that you have this picture, because there's actually a question about what was transportation.
This was the picture on the left shows the typical bus in my part of the country. There was no front entrance, or everybody entered the bus on the side, and there were long wooden benches, and you just slid across and sat at the far end. And once all the benches were filled, then you stood on the outside and held on to one of the bars there and hoped that you wouldn't fall off as you went down the road. The other picture shows a typical classroom in my part of the country. This was a sixth grade classroom. I taught many of these students. It's not a picture of me in it. I don't have any pictures of me teaching. But you can see that this school did not have windows. It was open space. There's thatch on the walls, there's thatch on the roof. And when it rained, it got pretty wet.
Now, these are really interesting pictures. It seems like you got really involved culturally.
We had no choice really, but to become involved culturally. The Filipinos are great on putting together shows and presentations, and we as volunteers were expected to be participants. And they particularly like to show off in the different communities that they had an American volunteer who would come and do whatever it was that they were asked to do. And in these particular pictures, our school one year was doing Muslim dances from the southern part of the country. There wasn't a soul that was Muslim anywhere nearby. And whether these were really Muslim dances or not, I have no idea. But this is what the local people considered to be typical Muslim dances and typical Muslim costumes. More traditional on the right is a picture of people wearing more traditional costumes for a folkloric festival. You see in the background the typical houses of the community, thatched roofs, thatched sides, very vulnerable to climate.
So these pictures are great. You as well have told me quite a few stories. What story will you be sharing with us today? And I believe it's also in the book that Brenda spoke about.
Well, I have taken excerpts, but I'm going to try and do something a little different.
Okay.
And I'd like to say that whether we admit it or not, we each live in our own bubbles. And this is my bubble from the time I went to the Philippines. I was excited about the daily bus commute. 20 minutes on one bus and then 20 minutes on another bus. You saw the pictures to get from the town where I lived to my school. I thought, so much to observe and learn on my commute. I considered myself lucky. I was among the half dozen volunteers in our group of about 125 assigned to a community where the local language was Tagalog, the national language, the language we'd studied in our in-country training course. Most of my colleagues ended up in places that spoke one of the other 100 languages of the Philippines. I expected that by listening carefully on the bus, I would hear revolutionary thoughts. I assumed were sweeping that part of the world. Remember, this was the 1960s, when communist revolutionaries were imagined everywhere. Castro in Cuba, the struggle against the Viet Cong in Vietnam. In the Philippines, the local communists had been active not too many years earlier. So, what were people talking about on the bus? I was really excited to learn. What were the local revolutionary thoughts? I was shocked. I heard the men talk about the motors that didn't work, their chickens and pigs, and pests in the rice fields. I heard women talk about finding food for their kids, buying clothes for the family, and the cost of food in the market. Nothing at all, obviously, revolutionaries. 13 of us were assigned to the province of Camarines Norte. The province was only an hour flight from Manila by plane. But we didn't fly to our assigned communities. Our trip took most of a day, a rickety train ride for half the trip, and then a bus to get to the provincial capital of Dayat. When we arrived in the provincial capital, it was raining cats and dogs for days, water everywhere. As I would learn, this was what a typhoon was like. There would be more typhoons before I left. I get used to the penetrating rain after a while. We each were assigned to a different elementary school, or more specifically, to a separate school principal with whom we had to work out our specific job. We were technically teachers' aides, but nobody on Peace Corps staff ever explained exactly what that meant, other than we could not be teachers. Our Filipino hosts likewise didn't have a clue what we were supposed to do. It became whatever we could figure out. Within a few months, I'd worked out a routine where I taught many subjects, each for an hour a day, to reach a maximum number of students once a week. I taught English, science, math, literature, and current events. In my spare time, I coached the elementary school football team, that soccer team, directed a school play, and advised the students on their yearbook. My town sat along sides of a road extending along a shallow bay. The nicest houses were made of concrete. Most of the other houses were made of thatched siding with thatched roofs and were connected by mud walkways and occasional planks. The houses sat on stilts above the tidal waters. Pigs were kept underneath. The elementary school was a series of classrooms, some made of concrete blocks, some made of thatch, connected by paths along a sometimes steep and muddy hillside. This is hardly a prosperous town, even by Filipino standards. The best jobs were held by the teachers and municipal officials. The town was essentially a rural slum where most of the people were looking for jobs in the mines. Our Peace Corps stipend, about $55 a month, and Brenda said $52, maybe that was it. This was supposed to cover food, housing, bus transport, and an occasional beer. It seemed less abysmal when we realized that this was the same salary that our counterparts were earning, and these were the best jobs in town. And these were families that were supporting 5 to 8 children. Slowly, I began to learn that the stories I heard on the bus represented the serious problems everyone faced every day. Food was expensive, things didn't work, children were often ill. Life was tougher for the average person than seemed on the surface. When the monsoon came, I may have stayed dried, but I soon realized that lots of people in the community were continuously soaked in their thatched homes, and they missed meals in the endless wetness. I also observed petty thievery among local officials, learned about the wives of our local Catholic church, Catholic priest, and watched teachers take money from the fees and voluntary charitable contributions of students. At first, I was outraged by what I was learning. As time passed, I began to understand how the difficulties of daily life had pushed all manner of good people into doing a little more just to get by. I soon realized that these were mostly very decent people pushed to their limits by circumstances and trying to survive. These people, not the officials, were the heart of the country. I may not have liked what I saw, but it made me more tolerant about the nature of people in difficult circumstances. I spent only 2 years in the Philippines, but in subsequent years, have lived in half a dozen countries in Asia, Africa, and Europe. In each country, I met officials who lived the middle-class lives, or more frequently, upper-class lives, seemingly not too different from those lives that one lived in the United States. In each country, I observed and kept my mind open. Life among the officials was very different from life for the average person. These officials may have spoken my language, I realized were not the heart of the country. While no place was quite like the Philippines, in every new situation, I listened. I tried to absorb what I saw. I tried to tailor my approach to each culture with more insight than I might otherwise have had without my Peace Corps experience. I was learning about each new place by trying to see it through the eyes of others. And I would offer as final word to anyone who is so inclined, break out of your bubble, step away from what you know, learn about the world on the outside, try the Peace Corps. Great experience. Thank you.
Parker, that was great. I really like how you framed that they are the heart of the country, and you really, really detailed that. Thank you so much for being here, Ambassador Borg. If you have any questions, again, for Parker or Brenda, place them in the Q&A box. We're going to be taking questions at the end. As we prepare for our final panelists, I'm going to read again. All of them have such incredible bios. I can't read them all to speak about their incredible accolades, but Maureen Carroll was a volunteer in 1961 in the first group of Peace Corps volunteers of the Philippines. She worked at Peace Corps from 1964 to 1968 as a program evaluator and deputy director of the Division of Evaluation and Research. In 1991, Maureen returned to the Peace Corps as country director in Botswana, which had 260 volunteers in education, environment, and small business development. When Maureen returned to Washington, she was director of planning and policy analysis and then acting director of the Africa region for close to 3 years. As a consultant, she trained new country directors for 4 years. For many years, she has been on the board of the Peace Corps Alumni Foundation of Philippine Development, and an RPCV organization that finances the university education of Filipinos unable to afford an education. Welcome, former director, country director, Ms. Maureen Carroll. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Come off mute and please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your service.
Hi, thank you so much. Good morning to everyone and happy March 1st, a significant date in all of our lives. I think you've done a pretty good rundown of my bio. I'll add, as different from my colleagues here, I had been out of school, out of college for about 18 months before I joined the Peace Corps, and I got hooked by being active in the Kennedy campaign. Yes, I've had a tremendous amount of Peace Corps service. Really the 60s, I was pretty much involved in Peace Corps, and then again in the 90s and a little bit into the 2000s. I'd like to underscore that that last title that was I want to underscore my participation in the Alumni Foundation because I want to make sure that everybody out there who has any connection with the Philippines goes online and make sure they join up with us in this endeavor. We've just celebrated our 40th anniversary and intend to do 40 more years with new volunteers.
That's absolutely amazing. That's absolutely amazing. Again, these pictures are amazing. This is your actual ID?
Yes, this was, and you notice the date on it is October 12th, 61. It was actually taken a little bit later than that during our Peace Corps training. But my expression is not exactly happy and enthusiastic, but the sun was shining into my eyes. But I do have it yet. I don't know that it gets me anywhere, but I like holding on to it.
It's great. It's great to see. And this is you in your classroom?
Yeah, this is my teaching in the Milagrosa Elementary School. And this photo I'm particularly fond of because one of the real problems that Filipinos have in speaking English is a phonemic problem and confusing P's and F's, for example. And this child here is successfully reciting fee, fi, fo, fum, see my finger, see my thumb. So I'm quite happy and she's happy too.
There's a question that came in that I want to send to you. They're asking, where did the materials you used to teach come from? Were they part of the regular curriculum?
Well, it would be a mix. I would say that we actually brought with us a brand new book on teaching English as a second language in the schools that had been developed, I can't remember, by some foundation or university. And we were the first ones out in the provinces with those books that we could work with the teachers, introducing them to this new curriculum. Otherwise, we made it up. It was our curriculum.
These pictures are, this is another school?
Yeah, this is a school where I made a visit for about a week or so to help out with the teachers and children, and they considered it significant enough to have an actual professional photographer come and take our photos. Filipinos are very fond of having souvenir photos. On the right is our charming house. In front of the house is myself holding a child and another of my housemates with her hands on top of the child and another boy sneaking sort of behind us. The lower part of that building was actually formerly a Sari store where they sold sundries, but we wound up converting it into a library, as Brenda had a huge library, but we had a nice small library that we ran particularly for the children. And we left that behind with someone in charge. And then some years later, a fire destroyed the library. But the house was very small, but it was rather typical. The picture, as Parker described, we were very much into the culture of the Philippines and the performing arts. And here I am, my housemates, in a performance. I'm in the rear on the left. We did a number of those. We did a lot of dancing and singing. The best thing about the Philippines, I can't carry a tune in a bucket, but they didn't really care how well I sang. I just had to sing. The middle photo is a graduation at one of the schools I taught in, and I'm with a child who was very bright and was the honor student of the school. And then lastly, on the right, and the second Christmas we were there, my two roommates and I decided, I don't know what we decided, but we thought we would get a special Christmas greeting that we could send home. So that's us in our national dress and the greeting card.
So I'm really looking forward to your story as well. Like I said, you all have such great stories on your experience, and we will be sharing today. Is it from the book as well?
Actually, I'm not going to read from the book. I decided that it was too long. So what I want to do is sort of, I would say it's almost more of a commentary than a story, but I will go back to saying 1961 was really a very thrilling year. for the country and certainly for me personally. On January 20th, Kennedy was sworn in, and he announced, the torch is being passed to a new generation of Americans. And then he challenged us all saying, ask what you can do for your country instead of what your country can do for you. So, I immediately went into action, applying, et cetera. And like Brenda, got a telegram at some point at midnight telling me I had been invited to the Philippines. That year in 1961, and that year for Peace Corps, was like a juggernaut. I mean, we went from an executive order on March 1st to legislation being passed in September. And by the end of the year, there were close to 600 volunteers in 10 countries around the world, all put together in the space of really March to December. I think, being part of that was exciting and sometimes it was frustrating. But I think, as you can tell from Brenda and Parker and myself now, it was just, we're so proud that we were part of that group. Basically, our lives were radically redirected by the experiences of 1961. Needless to say, the speed of the startup had its downsides, the most significant being the fuzziness of our jobs in the Philippines. And I think Parker referred to that as well. We were to be quote, aides. We were not to be teachers. We were, quote, to be aides in the elementary school system, assisting rural school teachers in the teaching of English, science, and math. I didn't know that was for me. I thought I was just the English because I was never quite good at science and math. But that was about the amount of specificity that went with the job. And it left us and our local host schools and communities to, quote, figure it out, right? So, and our Filipino colleagues were as mystified as we were about why we were there. But on the whole, they were happy to have us. They were among the most hospitable people in the world. Most of us did figure out a way to be useful in the schools, while others wound up finding a variety of ways to be in other sectors. People created projects for themselves. And then there were summer projects, which allowed many of us to become involved in significant developments like the founding of the Mindanao State University. Many volunteers helped found that university physically as well as with curriculum, et cetera. Because I'm sort of a goody-goody, and my housemates were rather dutiful in trying to turn this vague role into useful work. And we had a school supervisor who supported our efforts. We were always trying to increase our impact as though we were having loads of it. But anyway, we would be very worried about that. And we were teaching in 2 different schools and running monthly workshops. And then we came up with an idea that turned out to be one of our most memorable experiences. We decided that each month we would go out to a remote barrio and stay to work with the teachers and the students intensively for a week. Now, by remote, that means the barrio could only be reached by boat or by hiking. If it was an inland barrio, you hiked in for a couple kilometers. If it was a coastal, you got into an outrigger boat and off you went. So despite some fairly basic living arrangements out there, we appreciated the quiet and the beauty and the simplicity of life in these places. With no distractions, we were able to develop quality relationships with the teachers in a short period of time and to find what I'll call common aspirations with the residents who came to meet us out of curiosity. Even though we had insisted that the teachers go to no trouble on our behalf, nothing can keep a Filipino from being hospitable. So we also enjoyed Filipino food delicacies throughout the week. And then at the end of each week, we would return home bearing various thank you gifts, which the children, these poor children, would bring us one egg or a guava or perhaps a sugarcane stick. That remote barrio experience was actually just a microcosm of our larger experience living close to 2 years in a rural Filipino community. You know, well thought out jobs are really important for volunteers, and I heartily endorse good programming. But what most earns the goodwill and the gratitude of us country people is that Peace Corps volunteers come and live on their level, speak their language, and eat the food. In those kinds of interactions, the seeds of peace are planted as each side recognizes and values the humanity of the other. And as a footnote to that, I'd like to share with you an excerpt from the letter I received from my former head teacher about 2 or 3 months after I was home. And this is her comment related to the point I was just trying to make. She says to me, "Your stay in the Philippines had its effect on your life and habit. Would I be right if I say on your attitude also? I feel and believe that most, if not all of the PCVs who came here had gone home to the Western world with a greater and broader understanding of our life and our way of living. I am glad that the late president had that deep insight into world problems and sent intelligent young Americans who could learn from us and understand why we are what we are. You know, I was happier with your coming because then we Filipinos do not have to toe up to the level of foreigners and just be natural and sincere." Thank you.
Oh, I think one line that I heard you say was, in a nutshell, integration are the seeds of peace. I think that's something I'm going to use as a recruiter and telling new leads, like you just going in, eating the food, being with the people. Those are the seeds of peace. Definitely going to use that. That's very, very powerful, very powerful.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you.
That is very powerful. We have one question. Have any of you gone back to Balacabayan, back to your towns? Have you ever
Yes,
went back to visit?
I've been back 5 times.
Wow.
But the last one was 2005, so it's been a while.
And you stay in touch with your friends?
Yes.
Wow, that's amazing. What about you, Parker? Have you been back?
I went back in I went back to my town 2 or 3 times, but mostly it was in the 60s and 70s after I left. Most recently was probably 1997 when I went back. A whole group of us, we had one of our reunions. I think it was our 35th
No,
reunion.
it was a trip sponsored by the foundation, by the Peace Corps Alumni Foundation. It was called Balikbayan, and it was for the 35th anniversary of Peace Corps.
So many of us went back for that, and I saw Maureen in her village back then. We drove from Manila down to the southern tip of the country, or the southern tip of Luzon Island, and had a wonderful time.
Brenda, have you been back?
As I was posted as a Foreign Service officer in the Philippines in the late 70s, actually my first Foreign Service assignment, and in I think it was 77 or 78, I went back, and that was when I learned that the library had very recently been destroyed. But I did get to meet with some of the town folks and my principal, and stay with a young woman who'd been a volunteer in one of our summer camps. It was wonderful to go back.
Maureen, I'm going to send this to you via chat later on, but someone is just giving you kind of praises. She was in 13 in the Philippines, Rebecca Palmer. And they're also asking, does anyone have contacts in Cavite City?
With whom?
Cavite
Where?
City. Contacts with Cavite City. Do you know?
Cavite.
Cavite City, yes. Do you have any contact?
Yeah, no, there was a big Marine base there when we were in the Philippines. And so there were no Peace Corps volunteers in Cavite.
With Subic Bay, is that what you were?
It says Cavite.
Cavite.
Cavite, oh, no. No.
Someone is asking, how do you connect with RPCVs? It sounds like the Philippine cohort is a great RPCV group. They're very strong. I think they put in the chat box, if you want to join the Philippine RPC alumni group, that's a great way to join them. Let me see if I can find it again, but they did put it in the chat box, the email. Global, what is your email for the alumni group? Oh, I see it. PCV.
www.rpcvphilippines.org.
And that's a way you can contact them. So we are running out of time. I'm so sorry. These stories were so impactful, so great. I wish we could stay on a little longer. I know I was inspired. If you were inspired by the stories today, and maybe you're interested in really taking the jump to join the Peace Corps, they've all recommended. This is kind of our cycle. Today is one of our deadlines, March 1, but we sometimes extend those deadlines. So please check our website, but our next deadline for application is June 1 with a departure date of October, November, December of that following year. But this is our cycle. We're going to ask each of you for some quick closing remarks. I want to thank you all, not just for your service, for the time that you took today to share these incredible stories. I'm going to start with you, Brenda, your quick closing remarks, please.
Well, I put on the line, I think exactly what I wanted to say is that the service taught me to look beyond my own pride, my own bright ideas, to factor in the hints of reluctance and subtle clues. I learned to be successful. I think what I really learned was to be an astute listener, and that has been a lifetime gift. And I still stand by that.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And Parker?
As I said in my statement, we all need to step outside of our bubbles and learn about what the rest of the world is all about. And there's no better way than the Peace Corps as a way to learn to see the world through the eyes of others.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And Maureen, it's coming. There we go.
Yes, I selected a favorite quote of mine from Sergeant Shriver, and it's connected with the commentary I gave a short time ago, that peace requires the simple but powerful recognition that what we have in common as human beings is more important and crucial than what divides us. And I encourage folks thinking about the Peace Corps to go for it.
I like it. Go for it. And integration are the seeds of peace. I'm going to remember that, Maureen. We want to thank you all for celebrating Peace Corps' birthday today with us. If you are interested in that recording, which some of you have all asked, please contact me at creed@peacecorps.gov. If you're interested actually in putting in that application and joining the Peace Corps, use this QR code. It'll take you to connect with the recruiter. You put in your information and your local recruiter will contact you. These are some other upcoming events that we have. Infotable University, if you're in San Francisco and you want further information. We also have a country spotlight serving in Timor-Leste. And then next week, the following week, I'll be doing on the 6 sectors of service. You want a little more detail about that. I can't thank my panelists enough. This was just so inspiring, but also educational as well. We want to thank you all for going the distance to make a difference. As we end Peace Corps Week, our theme again is optimism in action. So if you're on a social media platform, please send us a shout out, #optimism in action. Also, at the end of this, you'll receive a survey. Please take a moment to fill out that survey. It helps me to better create and develop future webinars, specifically on topics that you would like to hear from. I take it very seriously, so please take a moment to fill out that survey and I'll create a webinar on that topic if you have a suggestion. Once again, I want to thank you all. You've been busy in the chat saying hello to each other. I wish we had more time to do that. But yeah, check the chat. People are saying hi, who they're from. I'm gonna try to read through some really quickly. RP Terry, Nemothy, 1977. I don't know, panelists, if you can see the chat, 2017, 82, 74. We have quite a few people here from Philippines, so they really came out to represent. Terry, Group 26, Santa Cruz. Yeah, so check the chat. You can see quite a few people. We want to thank you all for being here. We're going to have to sign off because we are out of time. But as we do, just take a minute to see who has said hello to you. Thank you again to my panelists. Happy birthday to Peace Corps, and enjoy the rest of your Peace Corps week. Have a great day. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time. Thank you. I don't know if you can see the chat box. Victoria's saying thank you. Erica's saying thank you. Just in case you know some of these names, Rebecca,
Mhm.
Casa, Maria, Marina Farmer.
That was great.
Are you able to see the chat? Because so you're getting so many thank yous and thank yous, all of you. I'm going to try and copy the chat and send it to you as well.
Thank you.